Hey everyone, in this lesson we are going to be looking at how 3D objects are made. So in Blender there are three main elements that a 3D model consists of, okay? And we're going to go through each of them and see how they work and how they can then be utilized. So the first one is the most simplest one, and that is vertices. Now a vertice, or a singular vertice, which is known as a vertex, this is basically a point in 3D space, and a number of different vertices all connected together is what creates ourselves a 3D model, okay? So if you have a cube, the different points on each corner of the cube, that is going to be a vertice. Whereas something like a sphere, for example, is going to have, hundreds and maybe even thousands of vertices to create that smooth profile. Now, with these vertices, they can connect to one another to form edges. So on a cube, all of those sharp 90-degree corners, those are going to be the edges where those vertices connect to one another. And then the third and final aspect is going to be faces, okay? If you have three or more vertices, those can then form to create a face. And a cube, as we can see here, has its different faces as well. Now, something like a sphere will require many more vertices to form its smooth shape. And as you can see here in Blender, we do have those black dots which represent the vertices, those black lines which represent the edges, and in between, you can see we have those square faces dotted all around the sphere, okay? So a sphere is going to have a lot more resolution, as you could say, compared to something such as a cube, which is only going to have a very limited number of faces. And then, as you can see here, we can have a little example of how more vertices allows for more detailed geometry, okay? The more vertices you have, the more resolution you have, will then increase the polygon count. That may have been something you've heard before in terms of 3D modeling or in terms of video game graphics, okay? The higher resolution that a model is means it has more polygons, more triangles making it up. So how can we actually go about modifying these vertices, modifying these edges, and these faces inside of Blender? Well, in the next lesson, we are going to be looking at the edit mode inside of Blender. Hey everyone, in this lesson, we are going to be looking at the edit mode inside of Blender. Now, first of all, what is the edit mode and what is a mode? Well, basically, so far throughout this course, we have been working in what's known as object mode. Now, we can tell that by looking at the top left corner of our 3D viewport. You see here we have object mode, and if we click on that, you can see we can switch over to a number of different modes. Now, this basically determines how we are interfacing with the objects that we select and how we can then modify them. So object mode basically means that when we click on an object, that entire 3D model is selected and then we can modify it as a whole, okay? Whereas edit mode is where we sort of open up that model and we go in deeper and modify its individual aspects. So let's have a look at how we can do that. I'm going to go ahead and select the cube that we have right here. I'm going to go up to where we have the object mode drop down and I'm going to switch over to edit mode. Now you can see here that a number of things change. First of all, the visual of the cube changes. We have these little dots on the corners now. Every face is orange. And on the left-hand side, we have a large number of tools at our disposal. This here is edit mode. So this is where we can edit the individual vertices, faces, and edges of the model, okay? So let's have a closer look at how we can do this. So if I just click off to the side, we can then deselect everything. And if I click on these little dots, you can see that I can highlight them in that orange. Now, what we are doing here is we are selecting the individual vertices of this cube, okay? Because a cube is made up of a number of different vertices, 8 in total, and those then connect together to form edges, and those edges can then form faces, okay? So if I select a vertex here and then press G, what you can see is that I can then move and modify this individual vertex. So as you can see, we can then make cool custom shapes of this cube. We can then adjust what it looks like. This is how we can then start modifying these default primitive shapes into pretty much whatever we want. Okay, so I'm just going to undo that right there. Now, as well as being able to modify the vertices, we can also modify the edges. So to go over to select the edges, we need to go to the top left corner, and you can see there are 3 buttons here. We have selecting our vertices, we have edge select, and we have face select. So I'm going to click on edge select, and now when we click on our model, we are selecting the edges, okay? And then we can modify those individually. We can also scale them up, we can rotate them, and you can see we can really start customizing this model to however we wish. So that is how we can edge select and start modifying. And then finally, we have our face select. And face select is going to allow us to select our individual faces. We can then move them around, we can rotate them, we can scale them. We can pretty much do whatever we wish with these faces here. Okay, so again, we have vertex selection to select the individual vertices. We have edge selection to select our individual edges. And then we have face select to select our individual faces on the model. Now, if you want to go back to object mode, you can go up to the drop down here and click object mode, or as a quick keyboard shortcut, you can press tab, and that is going to toggle between object mode and edit mode. Now, here inside of edit mode, there is also going to be a large number of tools at our disposal, okay? Now, it may look a bit daunting with the number that we have here compared to object mode, but we will be going through a number of these throughout the course. So don't worry, we are going to be looking at those, and hopefully you're going to have a much better understanding of how you can actually transform something, such as a cube, into any sort of thing you want. You might want to make a sword for a video game. You might want to make a bottle for maybe a potion pickup. There are a large number, an unlimited number of things that you can create from just a simple cube, really. So we're going to be looking at those tools a bit later on. But yeah, for right now, this here is edit mode, which allows us to edit the individual aspects of a model. Now, one thing to notice is that if I do go ahead and create two objects here, so I'll create a cube, I'll move it over here. Okay, if we select this first cube, for example, and go into edit mode, what you'll notice is that I can, of course, select individual aspects here and modify them around, but I can't click on the other cube, okay? And that is because edit mode is object dependent, okay? We can only edit one object at a time. So if I wanted to edit the object on the right, I would have to first of all go back to object mode, select it, then go into edit mode, okay? And now I can modify this object here. And as you can see, I cannot click on the object on the left while I am in edit mode on another object, okay? So you can sort of think of it as object mode is looking at everything on a simple scale, okay, on a simple scope. We can select objects, we can move them around, we can rotate them, scale them, but we can't really edit its individual aspects. But we do have the ability to modify multiple objects at once, like so. Whereas edit mode is where we start going into the finer details of a specific model, okay? So yeah, that is a look at edit mode inside of Blender. Okay, so as a bit of a challenge, what I want you to do is I want you to start off with just a basic cube right here, and using the edit mode, okay, using the face select, edge select, or vertex select, I want you to go ahead and modify this cube so that it is going to be a very tall pyramid, okay? So I want the top of the cube to be pretty much a point, and I want it to be quite tall as well. So go ahead and attempt that using the tools we have looked at so far. So the edge select, the face select, and vertex select, as well as using the move, rotate, and scale tools, whichever ones you think will work for this job. Go ahead and do that, and I'll be right back to see how you're done. Alright, so I hope you had a go at that challenge. Pretty much what we want to do is we want to select our cube. We then want to go into edit mode by pressing tab. Now we want to switch over at the top to face select. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the top face right here. Now with that top face selected, I'm going to press S to go to the scaling tool. And I'm going to drag my mouse to the center, which is going to decrease the scale of that individual face. So about there, I reckon. Now zooming out, we now need to make it a bit taller. So to do that, with this top face still selected, I'm going to press G and then Z, and then we can move it along the Z axis here. And there we go. So now this is what we have. This looks a bit like a sort of monument, or it could look something like perhaps the top of a tree. So yeah, you can see how we can then begin modifying these objects. If you do want to go ahead and expand upon this, you might want to change some other things. So you might want to make it a bit shorter. You can then, have a sort of pyramid here. There's lots of things you can do, and we're going to look at some tools in a second that is actually going to begin allowing us to modify these objects in much more creative ways. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you all then. Hey everyone, in this lesson, we are going to be looking at a new tool inside of Blender, and that is the extrude tool. Now, the extrude tool is very handy as this basically allows us to create new geometry from whatever we have. Extrude basically means we are grabbing a surface and we are stretching it out, okay? We are extruding it from where it once was. So let's have a look at how this works. So here I have a default cube, and I'm going to press tab to go into edit mode. Now, inside of edit mode, I'm going to select the face select at the top left here, and then this is going to allow us to select faces. Now, what we can then do is we can extrude. Now, to extrude, we're going to go to the left-hand side, and we're going to go down to where we have this tool right here, where it says extrude region. So we're going to select it, and then this is going to appear right here. Okay, we have a circle, and then we have this little plus. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to click and drag on this yellow plus, and we're going to drag it up. Now, what has happened? Well, basically what has happened is we have basically gotten a face, and we have extruded that into its own three-dimensional shape. Now, if I go back to the select box tool, we can select these faces, and you can see it basically keeps the edges here, so now we have some new faces at the top. Okay, and this allows us to then modify it so we can create more complex shapes. Now, instead of going over and clicking on the extrude region button, we can use the keyboard shortcut E. So if I press E, you can see we can then extrude along an axis here, along a face. We can select one again, press E, and extrude it like so. Now, something else we can do that is pretty handy is once we've extruded something, so for example, if I press E on this face here and begin extruding it, you might want to be precise with how far you're actually extruding it. Well, if we look at the top left corner of the screen, you can see there it is telling us exactly how many meters we are extruding out. So as I have it about here, it's around 1 meter, then we go up to about 1.2, 1.5. But on our keyboard, as we are extruding in this state right here, we can enter a number. So let's just say we want to extrude 1 meter exactly. Well, I can press 1, and as you can see, it's going to adjust it so it is 1 meter out. I can then backspace and then maybe go 0.2, and it will go 0.2 meters. We could maybe go 0.5, it'll go 0.5 meters, or we could go 1.5 and it will be 1.5 meters extruded. Then we can simply hit enter, and that is going to apply that extrusion. Let's just say we want to extrude this out maybe 2 meters. Well, we can press E and then 2 and then enter, and that is going to extrude it exactly 2 meters out. And we can make sure by going into a side perspective here. So on the viewport gizmo, I'm going to get a side view. And remember back to when I said that each of these squares are 1 meter in length. Well, as you can see, this extruded region is 2 of these larger squares wide, so it's 2 meters, okay? So yeah, do know that if you are moving stuff or extruding stuff, you can always type on the keyboard specific values. So if I select this face, for example, and I press G to move it around, and let's just say we want it to move up, so we'll press Z, we'll move it up here, and let's just say we want to move it up exactly 1 meter, well, I can just press 1, and as you can see, it'll move it up 1 meter. We can also press G again, maybe along the X-axis we want -2, well, we can enter in -2, and it will move it -2 along the X. So you can see that keyboard shortcuts and using the keyboard is vital in having the best experience in Blender. Okay, so as a bit of a challenge, I want you to try and create this shape right here. Now, I created this shape by starting off with just a default cube and using the extrude tool. Now, if you want a hint, once I extruded, I also used the scale tool as well in edit mode. So do keep that in mind when trying to complete this challenge. So have a go at this, and I'll be right back to see how you're done. Okay, so I hope you had a go at that challenge. Pretty much what we want to do is start off with a default cube right here. We are then going to select it. We're going to go into edit mode by pressing tab. And then we are going to select the face select tool up here, or face select mode at the top here. We can then select a face. we are then going to press E to extrude it. Now, we can just free extrude if we wish, but I'm going to make it extrude out exactly 2 meters. So I'm going to press 2, press enter. And then with this new top face selected, I'm going to press S to go into the scaling tool, and I'm going to set this to be 0 so that the scale of the top face is now 0 times its original size. So it's basically going to shrink down to an infinite point. Now we can simply go ahead and do the exact same to all the other faces of the cube. So extrude, go out 1 meter, oh, not 1, let's do that again. We want to extrude this out by 2 meters, scale with S, and set this to 0. And then we can go ahead and do the same thing to all others as well. And there we go. So now we have this cool little star shape created and ready to go. Hey everyone, in this lesson we are going to be looking at the loop cut tool inside of Blender. Now the loop cut tool basically allows us to cut up our model into more pieces, okay? It allows us to add more resolution, adding in more edges to the model so that we can then modify it in ways that we might want to, okay? So I'll show you what I mean. So I'm going to select our cube here, I'm going to press tab to go into edit mode, and then I'm going to go to the top here, and I'm going to swap over to edge select mode. So now we are selecting edges. Now, for the loop cut tool, what we're going to do is we're going to go to the left-hand side on our tools panel and scroll down to where we find loop cut. We're going to select that. And now when I hover over my mesh, you can see that we have this orange line that is wrapping around whichever edge I am hovering over. So if we select an edge like this one right here and click, what that's going to do is it's going to create a brand new edge. Now let's get out of this tool by clicking back on select box at the top left. And what we have here is basically a new edge in the middle of our cube. So if we select these edges and then modify their positions, you can see that this allows us to basically not necessarily add new geometry to our cube like the extrude tool, but it allows us to add more resolution, which allows us to then modify it in more unique ways. Now let's go back to the loop cut tool. But instead of clicking it on the toolbar here, we can instead use the keyboard shortcut Control R. Now Control R is going to enable the loop cut tool, and as you can see, when we hover over, we have this appear here once more. Now, if for example, we want more resolution along here, maybe we want to add 2 loops. Well, we can just scroll up on our scroll wheel, and as you can see, we all of a sudden have 2. We can go 3, 4, 5, and have pretty much as many as we wish. Okay, so you don't need to just add 1, you can add multiple. Now, if we click and then drag, we can then adjust that along the edge as well. So we might want the loop cuts up here instead. We can go up there and click, and there we go. So now we can have much more complexity here. So now we can sort of scale that down, maybe select this one and select this one. You can select multiple things at once by holding down Shift, okay, and then selecting. So we can scale that. We might then want to increase the scale of this, go S and then X, move that out, and you know, we can create some pretty unique looking shapes with loop cuts. So I think a good example of showing how loop cuts can be used is by having a cylinder here. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to increase the height of this cylinder, make it a bit bigger, go into edit mode, and then we can create a loop cut. So Control R, and then let's create a bunch of them here. So I'm just going to scroll up, we're going to click, and there we go. So now what we can do is go ahead and start editing these. So I'm going to select the top face here, scale that down a little bit, maybe select the bottom face, scale that up, go to the edge select tool. And now what we could do is we could go through and select each of these edges like this, but that's going to take time. So what we can do is hold down Shift, Alt, and then click an edge, and that is basically going to select all of them around basically where they are connected from. So you can see how these edges here that I just selected are all sort of in a ring. Holding down Alt and Shift and then clicking will sort of do a mass select like that. And then we can maybe shrink this down. Maybe we can then have this one up here, shrink that one down. And you can see how we are all of a sudden creating this complex geometry just by creating some edge loops and then modifying them, okay? So this could be maybe some sort of railing for a staircase. You know, there's lots of different things you can do with loop cuts, and they will definitely come in handy in your use with Blender in the future. Okay, so as a bit of a challenge, I want you to go ahead and create this spherical shape. Now, I haven't gone ahead and created an icosphere or a UV sphere from the add menu right here. what you are looking at right now started off as a cube, and through the use of adding in some loop cuts and then scaling faces, shrinking down some vertices, I managed to create this spherical shape. So I want you to have a go at creating this sphere right here, and I'll be right back to see how you're done. Okay, so I hope you had a go at that challenge. Here's how we can do it. So I've got my cube right here, and what we're going to do is we're going to press tab to go into edit mode, and then what we're going to do is we are going to press Control R to add in the loop cut tool. We're going to scroll up once, so we're adding in 2 loop cuts. We're then going to click, and then we are just going to right click to basically get rid of that automatic adjusting there. We can do the exact same thing for both of the other sides, like so, and there we go. So now it looks a bit like a Rubik's Cube. You got the 9 faces on each side of the cube. So what we're going to do next is we are going to go up to the face select mode, and we're going to select the center face on each of these faces. So we're going to hold down shift so that we can select multiple things at once. Okay, now that we have all those selected, we're going to press S to go into the scaling tool, and we're just going to bring it up like so. Okay, so now we have scaled it up. Now, the next step is to get these corners less square-like. So I'm going to select the vertex select mode up here, and we're going to select each of these corners, those vertices. So we'll select them all like this, and then we'll press S to go into the scaling tool, and we're just going to scale it down. Now, when we are scaling with multiple things selected, it is not going to scale them individually from their origin. Rather, it is going to scale them towards the, I guess you could say, the average point between all of them. So since we have selected everything around here, its average point is directly in the center. So everything, when we scale it down, is going to scale down towards the center or away from the center if we scale it up. Okay? So that is how we can create a nice, simple cube, or not a cube, create a nice simple sphere from a cube inside of Blender.